Hi guys. Well, do you recognize where I am? I came in to try and get my laptop fixed and fingers crossed it's working. So I thought this would be a really nice place to start our story. The book I'm going to read to you is The Secret of Platform 13. It's very Harry Potterish. It's lots of adventure and lots of imaginative things going on. So let's begin. Chapter 1. If you went into a school nowadays and said to the children, "What is a gump?" you would probably get some very silly answers. "It's a person without a brain, like a chump," a child might say. Or, "It's a camel whose hump has got stuck." Or even, "It's a kind of chewing gum." But once this wasn't so. Once every child in the land could have told you that a gump was a special mound, a grassy bump on the earth, and that in this bump there was a hidden door which opened every so often to reveal a tunnel which led to a completely different world. They would have known that every country has its own gump, and in Great Britain the gump was in a place called the Hill of the Cross of Kings, not far from the River Thames. Does anybody know where the River Thames is? London. And the wise children, the ones that read the old stories and listened to the old tales, would have known more than that. They would have known that this particular gump opened for exactly 9 days every 9 years, and not 1 second longer, and that it was no good changing your mind about coming or going, because nothing would open the door once the time was up. But the children forgot. Everyone forgot. And perhaps you can't blame them, yet the gump is still there. It is under platform 13 of King's Cross railway station, and the secret door is behind the wall of the old gentleman's cloakroom, with its flappy poster saying, "Trains get you there," and its chipped wooden benches and the dirty ashtrays in which old gentlemen used to stub out their smelly cigarettes. No one uses the platform now. They have built newer, smarter platforms with rows of shiny luggage trolleys and slot machines that actually work, and television screens which show you how late your train is going to be. But platform 13 is different. The clock has stopped. Spiders have spun their webs across the cloakroom door. There's a left luggage office with a notice saying, "Not in use." And inside it is an umbrella covered in mould which a lady left on the 5:25 from Doncaster the year of the Queen's Silver Jubilee. The chocolate machines are rusty and lopsided, and if you were foolish enough to put your money in one, it would make a noise like "Hurrump" and swallow it, and you could wait the rest of your life for the chocolate to come out. Yet when people tried to pull down that part of the station and redevelop it, something always went wrong. An architect who wanted to build shops there suddenly came out in awful boils and went to live in Spain. And when they tried to relay the tracks for electricity, the surveyor said the ground wasn't suitable and muttered something about subsidence and cracks. It was as though people knew something about Platform 13, but they didn't know what. But in every city, there are those who have not forgotten the old days and the old stories. The ghosts, for example. Ernie Hobbs, the railway porter who spent all his working life at King's Cross and still liked to haunt round the trains, he knew. So did his friend, the ghost of a cleaning lady called Mrs. Partridge, who used to scrub out the parcels office on her hands and knees. The people who plodged about in the sewers under the city and came up occasionally through the manholes behind the station, they knew. And so, in their own way, did the pigeons. They knew that the gump was still there, and they knew where it led. By a long, misty and mysterious tunnel to a secret cove where a ship waited to take those who wished it to an island so beautiful that it took your breath away. The people who lived on it just called it the island, but it had all sorts of names: Avalon, St. Martin's Land, the place of the sudden mists. Years and years ago, it was joined to the mainland, but then it broke off and floated away slowly westwards, just as Madagascar floated away from the continent of Africa. Islands do that every few million years. It's nothing to make a fuss about. With the floating island, of course, came the people who were living on it. Sensible people, mostly who understood that everyone did not have to have exactly two arms and legs, but might be different in shape and different in the way they thought. So they lived peacefully with ogres who had one eye, or dragons, of whom there were a lot about in those days. They didn't leap into the sea every time they saw a mermaid comb her hair on a rock. They simply said, "Good morning." They understood that Eller women had hollow backs and hated to be looked at on a Saturday, and that if trolls wanted to wear their beards so long that they stepped on them every time they walked, then that was entirely their own affair. They lived in peace with the animals too. There were a lot of interesting animals on the island, as well as ordinary sheep and cows and goats. Giant birds who had forgotten how to fly and laid eggs the size of kettle drums, and brocklins like blobs of jelly with dark red eyes, and seahorses with manes of silk which galloped and snorted in the waves. But it was the mist makers that the people of the island loved the most. These endearing animals are found nowhere else in the world. They are white and small with soft fur all over their bodies, rather like baby seals. But they don't have flippers. They have short legs and big feet, like the feet of puppies. Their black eyes are huge and moist. Their noses are whiskery and cool, and they pant a little as they move because they rather look like small pillows, and they don't like going very fast. The mist makers weren't just nice, they were exceedingly important. Because of the years past and newspapers were washed up on the shore, or refugees came through the Gump with stories of the world above, the islanders became more and more determined to be left alone. Of course, they knew that some modern inventions were good, like electric blankets to keep people's feet warm in bed, or fluoride to stop their teeth from rotting. But there were other things they didn't like at all, like nuclear weapons, or tower blocks at the tops of which old ladies shivered and shook because the lifts were bust, or battery hens stuffed two in a cage. And they dreaded being discovered by passing ships or airplanes flying too low. Which is where the mist makers came in. These sensitive creatures, you see, absolutely adore music. When you play music to a mist maker's eyes, its eyes grow wide and it lets out a breath and gives a great sigh. Ah, it will sigh. Ah, and each time it sighs, mist comes from its mouth. Clean, thick, white mist, which smells of early morning and damp grass. There are hundreds and hundreds of mist makers lopping over the turf or around the shore of the island, and that means a lot of mist. So when a ship was sighted or a speck in the sky, which might be an aeroplane, all the children ran out of school with their flutes and their trumpets and their recorders and started to play for the mist makers. And the people who might have landed and poked and pried saw only clouds of whiteness and went on their way. Though there were so many unusual creatures on the island, the royal family were entirely human. and always had been. They were royal in the proper sense, not greedy, not covered in jewels, but brave and fair. They saw themselves as servants of the people, which is how all good rulers should think of themselves, but not often. The king and queen didn't live in a golden palace full of uncomfortable gilded thrones which stuck into people's behinds when they sat down, nor did they fill the place with servants who fell over footstools from walking backwards from their majesties. They lived in a low white house on a curving beach of golden and sand studded with cowrie shells, and always, day or night, they could hear the murmur and slap of the waves and the gentle soughing of the wind. The rooms of the palace were simple and cool. The windows were kept open so that birds could fly in and out. Intelligent dogs lay sleeping by the hearth. Bowls of fresh fruit and fragrant flowers stood on the tables, and anyone who had nowhere to go, orphaned little hags or seals with sore flippers or wizards who had become depressed and old, found sanctuary there. And in the year 1983, the year the Americans put a woman into space, the Queen, who was young and kind and beautiful, had a baby. Which is where this story really begins.